Hey friends, happy Sunday. We're back for chapter 1 of The Person You Need to Be that we started last week and went through the entire intro and just talked briefly about that. I'm going to be talking more today, but reading quotes from the book, so not reading the whole chapter to you. So part 1 starts off with a quote. Part 1's called Builders Activate a Growth Mindset. I embrace the label of bad feminist because I am human. I am messy. I am not trying to be an example. I am not trying to be perfect. I'm not trying to say I have all the answers. I'm not trying to say I'm right. I am just trying to support what I believe in, trying to do some good in this world, trying to make some noise with my writing while also being myself. Roxane Gay, Bad Feminist. Chapter 1 is called Stumbling Upward, which I really like that concept in general. So it goes through this story of this guy that was working on a documentary film about autism, and he had no knowledge of autism at all. Basically, he started learning about it, but he believed that he could grow, even though he felt very ignorant to what autism was. And so they called that the growth mindset. So the first section is growth versus a fixed mindset. It says mindset refers to our belief about our capacity to learn and improve. If I have a growth mindset about drawing, I believe that I can improve my stick figures with effort, time, and feedback. The alternative, a fixed mindset, is where I see myself as fully formed, either as someone who is terrible at drawing, or wonderful at drawing, or somewhere in between, and destined to stay that way. The fixed mindset is an either-or mindset because it allows no room for being a work in progress. So we know that the either-or mindset is a tenet of white supremacy, or I can't remember the exact wording, but like thinking in black and white, either or thinking. I think that is what White One Whisper says, either or thinking. I could be wrong, but so that really goes along with the same thing. And in this book, they tend to call it a fixed mindset versus growth mindset, but it's the same premise. And then he talks about parents' belief that he could learn about autism allowed him to enter unfamiliar territory with humility, take risks, and learn from others. Quote, I came into the experience just knowing that I didn't have the answers, end quote. And I think that that's the important thing in anti-racism work, and really just to be about everything, is going into things not thinking that you have all the answers or that you know best. I feel like we often see it on social media where people will say, I'm here to listen and learn, but then when someone teaches them something, they have like a comeback or like, but what about this? Like, and it's not like a in good faith question. It's like a, this is what I thought. I can't possibly be wrong kind of attitude. And I think that that really shines through. Let's see. Also, I'm working on not saying like and as much in my videos, but bear with me because that's a journey. I failed public speaking in college, in case anyone was wondering. So like making videos for TikTok and Patreon and all the things has really helped me grow in that way, but obviously still a work in progress. So the next section, which I kind of skipped over, but it talks about being timed to activate, not in a negative way though. So it talks about how, it talks about how if you are underrepresented, you are more likely to look for representation clues, however superficial, and take them into account. So it talks about studies where Black and Hispanic students were more likely to apply for a program if it showed Black and Hispanic students in the program, but even more likely if they were showed in like supervisor positions at companies, because that showed that they would be able to move up too. So that's why it's talking about people that are underrepresented, like looking at these superficial things and being more likely to take into account than somebody that has been able to walk through their whole life just believing they can be anything they want to be. It also talks about psychological safety and how that factors into a growth mindset as well. And business school professor Amy Edmondson penned the name, I guess, psychological safety. And her studies of teams showed that when a group believes they can speak up, ask for help, admit mistakes, propose ideas, take blame, confess uncertainty, and disclose inability, they learn more and perform better. And I really liked this. It said, consider the teams where you have held back from asking questions because you did not want to seem stupid. Maybe you made suggestions and felt they were dismissed without any real consideration. You may have been slow to reveal mistakes, even when it would have been useful for others to know about them, because you did not want to be judged negatively. You tried to hide your weaknesses. These are all normal responses to low psychological safety, where interpersonal fear is high. Now think about a team where you were less likely to behave in these ways, and notice what changed in your growth and performance. And low psychological safety teams foster fixed mindsets and are less likely to perform well. When a team's psychological safety is high, however, it is easy to imagine how growth mindsets and performance will flourish. So I really liked this part because just thinking about a situation I'm even in currently, where I very much have been feeling like my worth is based off my productivity, and I don't necessarily have the freedom to change anything. It's all based on whether I'm productive enough and meeting the numbers that I need to meet enough, and how I would suggest certain things or say certain things, like I learned differently, you know, all the stuff, and not feel like I was heard. And that led to me getting so frustrated that, I mean, I'm trying still, but like, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to find something else. Like, I just got so tired of feeling that frustration and that stress and that pressure every single day. And it makes me think about my privilege. And when we, especially lately, have heard, and I can't say whether they wouldn't feel the exact same way, but I can't even say this is similar. But to me, when I think about it, and I think about how Black women have been saying, we're so tired, we're gonna rest now, we're so tired of essentially trying to educate, trying to be there, trying to unite, whatever their goals were in those moments, trying to progress, and then continuously being disappointed by us, white people. And I just think about that, because I can find a new job, but like they can't change their skin color, you know? So this part was also interesting. It said, consider what happened when researchers created a high self-threat situation in a lab experiment. They tested participants on their general knowledge and then put electrodes on their heads to measure their attention levels to the feedback on their performance. The electrodes measured event-related brain potential, which reveals how much attention people are giving to a particular task and information. Participants in a fixed mindset paid close attention when told which answers were right versus wrong, but when they were given the chance to learn by seeing the correct answers, they tuned out. Participants in a growth mindset paid close attention to both types of information. In other words, they were willing to learn. So the fixed mindset and the either or thinking are the same thing, because when they're told right versus wrong, they're like, what is it? What's the right answer? What's right? What's wrong? And that is what we as white people are so about. Like, as I've talked about before, maybe in my TikTok videos, it's like the fear of the negative label, which I think it goes into somewhere in this book, maybe this chapter, I don't know, we'll find out. It was last week that I did my highlighting, so this is a little impromptu. But yeah, I think it's just so obvious. So they're not looking for the correct answers. They're just paying attention if it's which answers are right versus wrong. But if you could view the correct answers, would you? Are you even looking and listening? That it talks about, it doesn't mean that you're always going to understand immediately, but they'll put in the work to understand. That way you can meet them halfway. The sharing of responsibility so that people from marginalized groups are not always doing all of the work is critical. And then they talk about these people that were working together, I believe one white person and one Black person, and reflected on their role in unintentionally replicating the problem they were trying to address. We had to take a step back, listen, not get defensive, and try to make the lessons learned and apply them to the next thing. It is so easy to get defensive and say, well, we tried, all these people are mad for no reason. When people are angry at you, activating a growth mindset is critical to learning why they are angry. So this part, I believe, was where maybe not. I had so many thoughts when I was reading this, like so many, but it really did stick out to me, the unintentionally replicating the problem we're trying to address, because I feel that white people, especially those that are activists or that are working on anti-racism work, at least at the beginning, tend to do this so much. Like, we talk about like the moral righteousness and all this learning, but then we are putting ourselves at a morally superior level than our fellow white people, you know? And that's a red flag, I think. It says anger is a natural response from people from marginalized groups, whether they be women, people of color, gay people, immigrants. The resulting anger, however, can generate heat and self-threat. It can confuse or shut down fixed mindset observers. As builders, our opportunity is to learn from this anger, not to recoil from or tone police it. When people are expressing anger about something being unfair, consider listening with the intent to grow from what you hear. Even if the anger makes you uncomfortable, do not let it stop you from listening. Another thing we do a lot, we feel discomfort when people share their anger and their frustration. Part of that being that we just want to fix things instead of learning from it and just listening. We don't have to center ourselves in the anger. We can just listen and learn from it and not tone police it either. And a lot of times I think when we get opinions about what people are doing, particularly on social media, and we're like, oh, I don't know why they're so mad about this, or I really don't like that take, it was full of blah, blah, blah. That's our efforts to tone police someone. And it took me a long time to figure out what that was, and I think it can mean different things at different times, and it can mean more than one thing. But I do know that it can also be in those small ways that we feel confident to have an opinion on someone else's opinion, which is what White Woman Whisperer has talked about multiple times. And it just resonates so much with me because I'm like, I read that. When growth mindset matters the most. So this one is talking about the white person deferring to Brittany, who was the black woman. And she was talking about how they didn't put it on me as the women of color. In fact, they were really cognizant of avoiding a whole Brittany knows the answer or let Brittany go figure out this diversity thing type of approach. This leadership move was important as it signaled that the problem was everyone's to fix. It is at these moments when mindset shapes leadership response. In a fixed mindset, a leader might feel pressure to have all the answers rather than be a work in progress. So rather than risk being exposed, he or she pushes the problem to someone else or denies the problem. And how often do we do this or feel like, or see this being done? So much. And I think that that is super important. And I was always very confused about that personally, especially when I first started listening and with the journey and everything. I was like, okay, everyone's talking about how like we can't leave it up to the black women to do the work. We can't leave it up to black people to educate us. But how am I supposed to, like, I don't know shit. So I think that very well-intentioned learners can think this way. But it's more about us being able to say, I don't know, but we can learn together. Like we're all on the same journey together kind of thing. And I could be wrong about that interpretation as well. Like this is all just my thoughts, you know? But I do believe that it's easier to push the problem to someone else, to direct someone somewhere else, or deny that it's a problem altogether, which is what we see in people that fail to want to admit or believe that racism exists. The I don't see color people, if you will. It says, when it comes to issues like bias, it is more likely than not that our mindset will be fixed. In our national discourse, we stick to either or labels. Okay, it is in this chapter. Racist or not, sexist or not, homophobic or not, good person or not. The goal is to dodge the negative label. The psychology of good-ish people says otherwise. Our bounded ethicality means that all of us have blind spots. In fact, if you find yourself thinking or saying, I don't think I have any blind spots, then that is your blind spot. So they talk about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset lies in whether we believe we have blind spots. As builders, we should never make claims of not being racist, sexist, etc. These claims are rarely accurate and usually lower our credibility. Rather, we should say and believe, I know that I have work to do in this area. That statement, if made with sincerity, reveals movement from a reflexive fixed mindset to a more intentional growth mindset. In other words, we can be good-ish. When we are in a fixed mindset, we are walking on I'm a good person eggshells. We are in a constant struggle to not say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. I call this overwhelming feeling the fixed mindset tax because it's taxing on our attention. We focus less on the project, person, or policy at hand and more on not being wrong. Furthermore, our preoccupation with not being wrong means that we will not learn from our mistakes, which means we are even more likely to be wrong. The fixed mindset tax can be costly. So it says that moments of high self-threat trigger those reactions. Research shows that we are more likely to try to prove that we are right or to withdraw effort when we are in a fixed mindset and challenged by others. We are then in a worse position when we next say something, second guessing how it will be received without the insight to help us improve. That section was one of the most eye-opening moments for me so far when reading this book. And there's quite a few of them, but that one was very eye-opening for me. And I have a note that says, I have felt this way / done this with an exclamation point in the margin. Because, and I've talked about this before, but I believe that one of the biggest issues with us white people when we get on the journey is that we are in that constant struggle and walking on the I'm a good person eggshells. Like, we're really trying not to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. We have to be perfect, so to speak, or we think that we do. And that is putting the focus on the wrong thing, because all we're focused on is not being wrong and focused on the negative labels instead of being focused on what policy, project, moral value, like whatever person we are trying to amplify or learn about. Instead, we're just focused on ourselves and not being wrong, and we're not going to learn from our mistakes with that mindset. So, and this especially if we are in that place and we are walking on those eggshells, I think it is especially evident when you are challenged or when you mess up or when somebody calls you out on something. How we react to that is the biggest tell, in my opinion, about where someone is at on their journey. So one of the things I look for when I'm looking for people that can help me grow like other white women, and not to say that I wouldn't talk to white women that don't have these qualities, but what I look for when I'm like, okay, maybe we're like on the same wavelength a bit, is how they react when they might be wrong, or how they come across in general. Do they think that they're always right? So that is very important to pay attention to on social media, especially. So the next part is listening to your mindset voice. And it said, your fixed mindset voice might lead you to think, that is ridiculous. I'm not a racist. I should have kept my mouth shut. I will just say that I'm sorry the other person was offended and get out of this conversation as fast as possible. And it says, try to activate a different voice, which leads you to say, that was not my intention. Would you be willing to tell me what I did wrong? And I have a note in the margin on this one that said, that situation happens a lot on social media, and rarely do they activate the different voice. That's word for word what my note says. Because it's so true. People refuse to. They're just like, I'm not racist. I can't possibly be. And I will not say those words, ever. Ever. Maybe I have in the past. I don't know. I don't remember. But like now, because I don't know when I'm deconstructing and unlearning everything. So I don't know when something is rooted in racism or not. And if somebody tells me that it is, then it might be. You know? So one part it says that perceptions of diversity are fluid. What we perceive as diversity does not necessarily line up with the actual numbers, because diversity is what you want it to be. People will perceive a group as more diverse if they tend toward a more hierarchical view of the world. They will perceive a group as more diverse if they are feeling motivated to protect their own group. Members of minority groups will perceive more diversity if their own group is represented versus if other minority groups are represented. So they're talking about the woman Brittany and her colleagues being prone to perceive diversity distorting true progress. While our categories of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and more are imperfect and convoluted, they will offer us important measures. So they're saying that they are important, but everyone perceives diversity differently. That's why diversity is not our only goal or effort. And it says we need to find and center our partners. So she talks about it's really important that we don't center ourselves and pat ourselves on the back for our efforts. It's important to center the people who are representatives of that group, because we are not saying we're doing anything that people of underrepresented groups haven't been talking about forever. Yep. And Portia and White One Whisper talk about this all the time, but it's so true. So true. Yeah. I have nothing to add. And then how to activate your growth mindset. So it says everyone stumbles. Let's say someone suggests you have said or done something racist or sexist or homophobic, or you are wrestling in your own mind with something you might have done. Be on the alert for the fixed mindset voice declaring, I'm not a racist. When this happens, you are probably slipping into an either-or mindset. If you find yourself telling others how you support people from marginalized groups, that is another possible sign of a fixed mindset, especially if the people you are telling this to are from a marginalized group. Like, how often do we see that on social media? All the time, so much. Like, I do this, I do that. I marched in Black Lives Matter protests. I went to pro-Palestine protests. When the person that was originally saying something to you is the Black life that mattered, or the Palestinian person. So, yeah. In a growth mindset, you are more likely to accept that your apology may not erase the damage done and to refrain from reburdening the other person by asking them to make you feel better or put their anger aside. So it's talking about that we're more likely to apologize by saying, I'm sorry, or if you're in a growth mindset, you're more likely to apologize by saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong, rather than I'm sorry you were offended. Because when we do that, we're pointing our finger at the other person for taking offense rather than at ourselves for delivering the offense. So that's important regardless, like work, home life, whatever. And it said, if these are new ways of responding, you may feel uncomfortable, keep trying. Like all habits, these get better with practice, or easier with practice. As builders, we are ready to look at ourselves as individuals who carry unconscious biases and examine ourselves as part of systems in which biases are baked in culturally, legally, and structurally. To confront both unconscious and systemic bias, we will need to keep our growth mindsets activated. So yeah, that one is a lot to take in, especially because I think that so many parts, maybe, if you're like me, so many parts might speak to you and hit very, very close to home. And that's okay. That's the whole point. And also being careful not to shame others. You know, something happened in my comments the other day where somebody commented on a video that, like an anti-racism video I had done on TikTok, and said something along the lines of, I'm reading White Fragility right now. It's a great book. It might not have been my comments, but I think it was. And then my first inclination was to respond and be like, that was actually written by a white person. You should consider, you know, reading some of these books by people of color, Black people. And then I took a beat in a seat. I took a minute and I was like, wait, that's great. Like, she's trying to get more into the conversation, because this is somebody that had, at least I think, had mostly done more political videos and somehow fell into my videos and my comments. And it's not to say it's because of me, but just the fact that she is getting involved in these conversations is super important. So instead of saying what I was originally thinking about saying, I commented and I said, I'm so glad you're reading anti-racism books, ! And then I said, have you read Caste yet? I highly recommend that one. It's a great book. And it's not that I'm saying this to try to be like, look how far I've come, I'm a hero. Or to say that she did anything wrong. It's just to say that those little moments of growth are really cool. And thinking about how I would have responded even just like a couple months ago, definitely a couple years ago, versus how I'm able to respond today. And that's what I want, is to do less harm, just to be a tiny bit better, and not necessarily on an all the time basis, because I'm a human, very imperfect and very white, but I can try, you know? And I think that that's really cool. And she responded and was like, no, I haven't. I'll definitely check that one out. Like, sweet. And I didn't have to be condescending or make someone feel less than to do that. It's a conversation. And there's been a lot of talk recently about how we white people are not great at community. And that's one of the reasons. Because in my opinion, we are more likely to come into things with a, like, let me stand out, let me look great, versus coming into something with a community mindset. I have your back. You have my back. We're both going to have different strengths, and we're both going to be strong at different times. Sometimes I might need to rest, and I hope that you will continue this work. Like, then I'll be back, and maybe you need to rest. Like, that's what community is. Partially. from what I know so far. But yeah, so these moments show up in our lives all the time, and I think just taking a moment and also thinking about what our motivation is for responding a certain way. You know, my motivation in that moment was it's the uncomfy. and also sense of urgency, because I was afraid that somebody else was going to reply to her comment in an unkind way. Therefore, I was gonna maybe comment in a kind of unkind way. Like, make it make sense. I can't. But it's worth noting at the very least. I also have similarities with this. I saw Wicked today in theaters for the first time. And I loved it. Obviously, it's so good. But I have so many thoughts. I took notes. I was like a huge nerd in the theater, like taking notes on my notes app. So I'm going to do a video sometime this week, probably in a couple days, maybe Wednesday or Thursday. No, Thursday I have my friend's graduation. So it'll either be Wednesday or Friday, but hopefully Wednesday. But yeah, because I might film it in the next couple days, because the thoughts and the conversation that can take place here is wild. It was so good. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you see it ASAP. Like maybe before Wednesday, so you can join in the conversation. But yeah, it's super good. So that's going to be coming up this week. And then I plan on doing these readings every Sunday. So if you're into that, feel free to join in. If you want like a Cliff Notes version, you can feel free to get the book as well. I have it linked in my link tree, but I'm happy to continue reading little spurts and giving you my thoughts that might ignite some thoughts of your own. My friend and I are also getting ready to start a podcast soon. We're pretty excited about it. That's all I'm going to say for now. But if you're into my content, then you might be interested in this podcast. And I made a post a couple days ago, maybe yesterday or the day before. But I am looking to change careers somewhat. So I am trying to, if possible, get some traction, like to my Patreon, and things like that, and start doing more of that. I don't ever plan on like requiring a fee for my anti-racism content, because as we talked about in this book, and as I said in my post, like everything I've been saying, like Black women and people of color have been saying for years and years. So like, why would I can't charge for that. Like, it's weird. But I do have some plans coming up, and it would help if I had, some dedicated peeps to help promote those. And to those of you that did pay to subscribe to support me, like, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, more than I can say. Yeah, and I just want to, not be judged on my worth and do something meaningful every day. And that's what I'm working on right now. So be patient with me. And if there's something you want me to talk about or you want to see from me in videos in the future, please feel free to let me know in the comments and suggest all the things, because I am happy to take suggestions. We're all in this together. Until next time, bye.